Welcome to Women in Industry podcast. My name is Kirsty Davies-Chinnock, and today I'm joined by Tamsyn Williamson, who is a director at TimberTight Ltd. TimberTight specialise in quality timber frame buildings delivered to tight timescales and to tight budgets. Timber frame is the fastest growing method of house building in the UK. It is sustainable, eco-friendly way to build and is also a more cost-effective way to build. With off-site construction controlled in a factory environment and with an architectural design service combined with project management, TimberTight treats every project with a unique approach and fresh thinking. So welcome, Tamsyn. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Kirsty.
So I know you from the metal industry,
Yeah.
where you worked for nearly 20 years in metal stockholding,
Right.
and now you run a timber business. How
Yeah,
did that happen?
bit different. Perhaps not quite so feminist approach, but it was certainly something to do with meeting my husband. Um, there had, separate to that, been a number of changes within the company that I'd worked for, and I loved the company that I worked for. I loved the industry that I was in. But the changes had caused quite a bit of disruption to the customers that I'd known for years and years, who I really loved, and that was a big reason why I loved my job so much. I'd moved sites as well, and I was traveling to Warrington every day, so that could be 3 hours there and back every day. So of course,
It's a lot out of your day, that
it
sort of
really
commute,
does.
isn't it?
You think I'll set off early to miss the traffic, but it's just extending your day all the time. Uh, so it felt unsustainable in the long term. And then about another 18 months after that, another major change was announced, which I completely understood the strategy of the company, but it just wasn't for me. It would have meant another move. It was a merger, so I would have actually been relocating back to my previous site and bringing all the customers back again. And for me, that signaled that it was time to move on. I wasn't ready to go through all that again, and I'd become a little bit disillusioned. But I'd committed to myself I wouldn't just move to another stockholder because I already felt that I was working for a great company and I was really looked after. And for me, if I was going to leave, it had to be to something completely different. Met my husband, and he was feeling quite similar about his job. He'd been in timber frame for 20 years, and so I said to him, well, you pack your job in and I'll look after you. And he set the company up, and then it just all happened at the right time. I fell pregnant, and it just was the correct time to leave my company and join TimberTight the following January. I'd already helped Paul set the basics of the company up, so it was just the next practical step, really.
Well, it's practical, but it's a young company. You're pregnant. You're both giving up your jobs and starting a new
Yeah.
company. It's a big step.
Yeah. It was a big step, and actually, when I met my husband, we were married with a baby and a new business within 2 years. So there was a lot of change after having quite a lot of stability in my life for such a long time, working at the same company, and I'd been single for quite a long time as well. So I knew what my days looked like. And then we stepped into the unknown with TimberTight, and I have to be honest, I never expected it to grow legs like it has done, really. It's been an amazing journey.
I think when I was looking at your website earlier, it's I was like, oh, I see that because there's so many new builds going up everywhere, and you're just seeing the sort of the roof joist sort of go on prefabricated in a factory somewhere, and they're just popping them on the top.
That's right.
So rather than sort of seeing builders crawl all over them, so it's got to really reduce the build time when new properties are being built. Is that really sort of? Do you drive past sites that your roof joists and things are in and go, well, that took 6 months less because we were involved?
We do see our panels going up and down the motorway and the roof joists, and we like kind of anticipating which site it's for and things. And we used to do, you probably still do, Kirsty, we used to do that with stainless steel tubes on the bus and things like that, didn't we? Oh, I recognise that pattern, that's 6WL, you know. So yeah, we do that. And you were talking about people not crawling all over roof joists on site, and that's one of the great things about timber frame, because the working on site is one of the most dangerous things you can do, isn't it? So
Mm.
anything you can take off site and bring into a factory environment that can be controlled is preferable, really. So there's two things we offer, and it's that reduction of possibility of site accidents, but also we can give a price, and it 99% of the time it is that price. There's no extra 2 months on site because it rained for 2 months straight. You know, we can be in and out wind and watertight within a week.
Is it? Yes, British weather. It's really not conducive for any kind of site work, is it?
No, it's not.
So,
And that might, sorry to interrupt you there, but I think that might be why it's been 100% of the market more or less up in Scotland for so long, because their weather is so unpredictable that they need that security of having it watertight.
it's what struck me when I was sort of looking at this is that you've gone from sort of a customer facing role in the metals industry, but your role at TimberTight is primarily operations.
It is, yeah.
So,
I'm using a lot more, and we'll talk about it in a minute, my degree, I'm sure, but I'm using a lot more of what I learnt in my degree in my current role. I did a little bit of it at my last company because I was fortunate enough to get the service centre manager position. So I had to use those skills, but it was planned this way at this company, because that was part of how I've become disillusioned with sales. Particularly, you work your socks off to get to the end of the month, and then you have to start all over again the next day, and it can become a bit hard, I think. And so when I joined TimberTight, I was quite specific that I would do everything else but sales, although I found it hard to stay away, to be honest. I do love cold calling, Kirsty. I don't know about you, so when I do find myself with any free time, I'll just search for some new names and do a few cold calls.
there's nothing like the challenge of a cold call, is there?
Yeah, a lot of people don't
Yeah,
like them,
but
but great practice, I think.
I agree. And so you had all these years in the stockholding industry. You've moved into your new role, and you're using your degree as well. But how did those years in the stockholding um, business help you succeed in the role you're in now?
I think when you've worked in the same industry for your whole career, you kind of think everything's going to be the same, and it really was quite different. Talking again about how I'd become a little bit disillusioned, although I had some great relationships with my customers, it did often come down to price, and it still does in this industry. But we would call, back in the metals, we would call timber frame a niche industry because it's a small part of the market, it's growing, there's not a lot of competition, and that's what's very, very different to metals, where it was a really mature industry, lots of people fighting over the
Mm.
same work. There's a lot of legislation that's changed as well recently that will help promote timber frame, to do with reducing energy costs and sustainability in manufacture. And so those things mean there's a real buzz about timber frame at the minute. And I think that's how I feel differently about stockholding. I feel that the stockholding market is quite saturated, and timber frame is really in its infancy. You know, I'm excited to see where it's going to go.
And is that the most exciting aspect of your role, or is there something else that when you get up in the morning, you're like, oh, I can't wait to do this?
Well, of course, going back to sales, it's hard to get that out of your system, and winning new work and giving the customer the service and the product that they want is really what it's all about and what we get excited about. And those few times I have made a cold call and I get a success, I'm just like I was when I was 18 or 20, you're just as excited. Um, but my husband Paul does the quoting and he deals with the clients, so I'm a little bit removed from that. It's my role to, once he's won the work, make sure it gets to the customer to the right quality at the right time. What I get really, really excited about these days is helping other people develop and reach their potential. And I get a real buzz out of seeing other people being excited and getting satisfaction out of the work that they do.
There's nothing better than bringing someone on, particularly in a young company, and watching them grow in the role and in confidence. And you've got team members. Um, as you say, that's, one of the most exciting things you enjoy. Um, how many team members have you got?
There's 30 people working for us now. Some of those
Wow.
are in the office, so I'm responsible for 22.
That's a lot of employees in a short period of time.
It really is, yeah. And we've grown slow. I mean, we're 5 years old now, although it doesn't feel like it because we had COVID and then timber prices tripled. So we felt like
Yes,
it.
they did. I needed a new fence. I was not happy.
Yeah, it's been crackers really. If we'd have known, if you kind of better off not knowing what's in the future because had we known any of that, we may have never started the company in the first place. Um, but yeah, what's exciting more than anything is being a new company. I'm not stepping into a company and inheriting all these cultures and things that are already there. We're building it from the ground up. So we've put the core values together as a team with the guys downstairs, establishing the culture and all this stuff. It's what we make it, isn't it? And it's the blank page that is just so exciting.
Talking about blank pages, you did your degree, as you mentioned earlier, on business and economics, and you did it with the Open University. And I'm a
Yeah.
massive fan of the Open University.
Yeah.
Um, so thinking back to when you were studying and working at the same time, um, obviously it would add value to your career, but was there anything in particular that stands out for you in how it did add that value?
Well, I don't know if you feel the same, Kirsty, but when you've started out with your degree journeys, have you, for me, what I ended up with is far more than I ever anticipated. I have to be vain and say in the beginning I wanted a degree. I wanted to be able to stand amongst people who also had degrees and say, I know something too. And what I ended up with was this whole depth of understanding about a subject. It was far beyond anything I could have imagined. And more than that, it was time management skills, it was the ability to think big, and the support I got from the OU was fantastic. I wouldn't recommend it to everybody because studying and working at the same time can be very, very hard. When you've got an essay that's due tomorrow and then you might have clients that you've got to get back to as well, it can really feel like everything's getting on top of you. But there's no greater feeling, is there, at the end when you achieve it? Um, I think it always helps for your employer to see that you're willing to invest in your own future, both with your time and your money. If your employer will pay for it, that's fantastic. But I think it's a commitment you've got to make to yourself.
Mm.
And as I said, for me, it certainly grew legs way beyond anything I could have imagined. And if I had the time, I'd love to do another one.
I remember, I think it was my first degree, which I did with the OU. I was late on an essay and I actually got in my car and drove it and put it through my tutor's letterbox at 2 o'clock in the morning. So
Yeah,
it
no,
does
it's
happen.
fantastic. I love the degree. Um, it covered all sorts of subjects, so basic accounting, HR, economics was the extra part of my degree, and I loved that too. I feel like I've got a greater understanding of the
Mm.
world around me now as well. So, yeah, anybody that is thinking about doing it, certainly the OU for me was just the perfect choice.
The aspects now that they do, where a lot of it's online as well, makes it really accessible.
Does
But
it?
that's not the only qualification you've got.
No.
You also have a qualification. I've got to get this right. So apologies for going through my notes. Oh, I'm knocking my microphone. You have your MBIE, which is a qualification on mortuary science and embalming with the Yorkshire School of Embalming.
That's right.
And
I'm a
when I saw this, I
machine
was like,
farmers. Yeah.
tell me more, tell me more.
Um, well, that kind of happened by accident. When I started high school, I was really excited to start because I thought we were going to dissect something. That sounds a bit silly, I know, but I imagined it to be, oh, we might get to dissect a pig's heart or something like that. And when we did start school, they had all these specimen jars with all these very interesting, strange looking things in. But throughout the whole time I was at school, we only ever dissected a broad beam. Um, so that didn't quite work out for me. And I'd been fortunate enough not to experience any death in my family. So I think there was a bit of a mystery around that too. So when I did my work experience, I worked at an undertaker's for a week and I absolutely loved
Okay.
it. And I would have, if they'd have had a role for me, I'd have joined them from school. But as they sensitively told me, it doesn't really look very good for a 16-year-old to be trying to comfort a family member who's just lost someone. It's not really appropriate. So I started working in metals as my granddad worked at a valve company in Brighouse. And the undertaker suggested the embalming qualification. So I did that for 2 years. It was evenings and weekends, and I had to affiliate myself with an embalmer. And we would do a practical every week. And there were 6 exams and a practical exam at the end. And I'm a lifetime member of the Institute, yes. I loved it. Again, I loved it. I learned so it was the same as the degree. I feel like I learned so much from it. All I was interested in the beginning is seeing what the inside of a human body looked like, but I learned so much about the purpose of embalming. It's not just about hygienic treatment of someone that's passed away. It's about helping the family of the deceased person go through the grieving process in as best a way they can, really, and that's where the embalmer can help, because if we can sensitively embalm someone and help those family members view the body, which embalmers certainly advocate that, you can't get stuck in that denial phase of grieving. You have to accept that that person's passed away, and of course it's only a positive experience if they look like you remember them when you see them.
I think as human beings, we're still really rubbish at dealing with death and grief. We don't talk about it a lot. We ignore it. We don't get our wills done. We don't talk about our wishes. And yet it's one of the things that we're all going to experience, and all our relatives are going to experience when it happens to us. And it's something we need to be more open about. And I think the more we can talk about it as individuals, the better we're going to have a handle on it. And being able to say goodbye, as you say, is really important. It really is. And you obviously said goodbye to one career and started in a new one, with a new husband and then a young family. So I assume you're not studying anything at the moment.
No, not yet. I'd
So
like to trumpet back up, Kirsty. I used to play the trumpet. That's been on my list for a long time, but haven't had the chance yet.
So, I mean, would that be something that you'd look at doing if you think about your work-life balance, or having a young family? Is the home life very much focused on your little one at the moment?
It is at the moment. It is. Cameron's just 4 years old. He starts school this year,
Oh,
so yeah, it's all about him just now.
it's a good age for. I liked four.
Yeah,
Can I remember that far back?
he loves coming to the
And so
factory.
I was going to say, does he visit you at work?
He does. He wears his little ear defenders and his high vis and his safety goggles, but yeah, he's allowed in the factory and the pedestrian
Uh,
walkway, obviously.
Yeah, safety first. When my niece and nephew were little, they came in to visit and we had their high vises done with their names on, which was quite cute. Um, so you say Cameron's starting school this year, so that's a big goal for him. What about you? What are your goals for the rest of this year? Anything
Well,
in particular?
yeah, professionally, we've got to a point now where we're going to make some capital investments this year on some new equipment. We started the business on a shoestring, really, Kirsty. So the equipment that we've got has been fantastic. It's been a workhorse, but just one example of that is one of our saws. It's a very manual saw, cost us £1,000, and this year, hopefully, our business is going to turn up 5 million. So we think it's probably time to invest in some new kit. And you'll probably be aware where you are that there's all sorts of help available from the local councils and things. And we just had a conversation with our business support manager yesterday, and there is grant funding available for some percentage of that. So we're really excited to start finally going shopping. So I've got all these ideas of things that I want to speed production up.
There's nothing better than having a wish list of plant and equipment.
Yeah,
I constantly have one, and just being able to go, I'll have that one, please.
yeah,
Particularly if you get a grant towards it.
yeah.
Um,
It's amazing, really. You don't realize till you start networking, speaking to people, developing those contacts, just what help there is available for, especially young businesses. There's lots out there.
it's going to depend on which region you're in, but sometimes there's also statewide grants available as well. And even if it's only 10%, if you're investing 200 grand in a new saw, yeah, keeping 20 grand of that back into your working capital is much better than
Yeah,
not.
yeah.
And what about personally? Any goals for you to achieve personally?
Well, I've always been a bit of an exerciser, Kirsty, and this year I was trying to beat my nemesis, which is running. I absolutely hate running. But I think that's because I find it so hard. I'm not intending on doing a marathon or anything like that. I'm more trying to do it consistently. So I've done quite a few 10Ks. I'm trying to do 7 10Ks in 7 days. I did 6
Wow.
last week. The 7th, it was time commitments, wasn't able to fit it in there, but thought it was worthwhile having a bit of a rest. So once I've done that, I think what I'd like to do is factor in a 10K every other day and make that a standard part of my week. And I think that'll be okay. I think I'll be happy with it.
How long do you run a 10K in?
It's about 55 minutes, so not
Oh,
amazing.
I've never got one below an hour. Never. I think nowadays it probably take me closer to 2 hours. One of the things that other guests have mentioned are their metal mates or manufacturing mates. So, is there anyone or are there any people in particular that have inspired you over the course of your career?
I mean, 20 years feels like a long time, Kirsten. I have to say, there's been so many over the years, people that have shown kindness to me and helped me bring myself forward. Um, I think it always helps to have a range of
Mm.
people. So you need someone ideally within your business that you can speak to every day, and a couple of customers that you get on really great with. So if you're struggling to find something, you can ring and say, "Where would you go for that?" Or, "Do you know somebody that does this?" Or, "How might I do that?" And that's how I've done it. I've always had a real good group of customers and 2 or 3 people within the industry that I could speak to. Um, it's something special, isn't it, to be part of a group of people who all know each other, and when you see that you develop that relationship with, and I think there is that real team sense of people wanting to
Mm.
help others develop as well, and it's a special industry, metals. I do miss it.
Well, hopefully, quite a few stockholders will all have new roofs made out of timber frames, so you'll be able to mix
Yeah,
both lives together. That'd be good, wouldn't it?
would.
And if you were to talk to a young woman who was coming into the timber frame industry now, or even the metals industry, what advice would you give them?
I think disappointingly, there's still quite a lot of male-dominated industries out there, isn't there?
Yep.
Metals is always one, construction's another, although there are quite a few more women in home building companies than I used to see in metals, although it's 5 years since I left the industry, so maybe things have moved forward a little bit. And I've always felt personally that we've had to perform better than the average man in order to be seen and heard in the same way. I don't know if you'd agree with that. Um,
I
for
mean,
me,
yeah, in the early days, I 100% agree with that. But being a very loud person, I just sort of shouted a lot till everyone listened to me.
for me, that just made me even more determined
Mm.
to be better, you know, as best as I could be. I mean, there's certain advantages to being female. I mean, we're generalising here, aren't we? But we're seen as being better organised and having a bit more empathy. And when you're working in a customer-facing role, that's absolutely fantastic, isn't it? So I think you've got to be resilient and not take yourself too seriously, but you've also got to play to your strengths as well.
Definitely. And following on from that, what's the best advice that you've ever been given?
Well, when I was offered the service centre manager role, I remember saying at the time that I didn't feel ready, and I was told, well, nobody ever does. I was actually told we'd all stay in our mother's womb if we had the chance, you know, which felt a bit brutal at the time, but it's quite true, isn't it? You know, if we don't step outside of our comfort zone, we'll never grow, will we? Um, I often find myself telling myself in difficult times, feel the fear and do it anyway. Because just because you feel something feels uncomfortable or you don't really want to do it doesn't mean that you can't do it.
Yeah.
And that uncomfortable feeling is a barrier really to your own development. I've always had a bit of a problem speaking to a large group. I'm fair skinned and I blush really easily. So if I find myself blushing, I can just feel my confidence just start to
Mm.
go. And so I found myself seeking out opportunities to do that, even though I knew it was going to be a disaster most of the time and I was going to find it really, really uncomfortable. I knew that I would never get beyond that weakness if I didn't try. So I'd love to say that I'm fantastic at it now, but I'm not. But it's not something I can. It's not something that I feel I can't do anymore. You know. So um, self-development and improvement, it comes from within, doesn't it? You've got to recognize you want to make a change, and then you've got to focus on how you're going to get there, what those steps are going to be. But in and amongst all that, life's happening, isn't it? We're meeting partners, we're having children, we're doing all those things. And you've got to be selfish and prioritize your own needs, especially as a woman and a mother. We're always seen as the carers and the supporting act. And that was never good enough for me. I wanted to be able to stand on my own 2 feet and achieve something as an individual. Um, if you want your life to be a particular way, if you want to be someone that gets up early or goes for a run early in the morning or goes to the gym at night, it's never going to just suddenly light bulb, oh, that's who I am. You've got to make it happen. And after you've done it for a period of time, then it does become who you are. Um, I think we're the biggest barrier to our own success. And if you dream big, make plans and stay focused, then you can do anything.
You've got to take that first step. The first time you do anything new
Yeah.
won't be as good as when you do it for the 50th time
And that's it.
or
You've
the
got to not be
500th.
too hard on yourself as well, because you're not going to be perfect that first time. And if if you let embarrassment or fear of what other people might think of you get in the way, then you're just going to stay exactly where you are.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you so much, Tamsyn. Thank you
Good
for
to
coming
speak
on the
to you. Thank you.
podcast. And thank you everyone for listening.
Thank you.